Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by a very special guest, someone who I am a huge fan of and who my husband totally fanboys over, Dr. Jim Stoppani. Jim is a Yale educated PhD who has devoted his life to studying exercise, nutrition, and supplements. And after 11 years of university education and research, Jim worked on the editorial staff at Weider Publications for 11 years, where he eventually served as the senior science editor for top tier magazines like Muscle and Fitness and Flex. And in addition to being the personal health consultant for several celebrity clients like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Jim actually literally wrote the book on weightlifting, Jim Stoppani's Encyclopedia of Muscle and Strength. So, thanks to Dr. Stoppani's fitness programs, countless people across the world have been able to achieve results that they never dreamed could be possible. One of those people being my husband. So, without further ado, Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great. I couldn't have come up with a better intro than that. And that means a lot when, when someone who's interviewing actually knows my past and can correctly state all those facts, like going way back to when we had to pick up magazines to get
Yes.
information about fitness. Can you imagine a time when you couldn't just
Yes.
pick up your phone and be bombarded with
Yes. Well,
information?
I have to give your assistant or Ksenia some credit for helping me with that. But I will tell you, I left out a lot of facts about you that my husband has been rolling off, spitting off his tongue, that I left out of that. So definitely well researched. I was just sharing with Jim before we started recording that he literally is like, yeah, Jim's my hero, like my Jim hero. He's like, I have been using his products since 2013. Like he redid the supplement industry with like creating, clear, transparent labels, sharing how much of stuff is in it. And so he's a big fangirl for sure. And I am too.
Yeah, what's interesting is I never planned on having a supplement company. Never in my wildest dreams would I have. I'm not a business. I'm a scientist, and it finally occurred when I was working with bodybuilding. Well, I was still at the magazines, right? I was working with bodybuilding.com, and it was sort of not really their concept. I have a business partner who works with me on my website. I've got the website, the app, the jimstoppani.com, which is all, just fitness based workouts and how to, do different exercises, you know, but so many people, were using my, I would teach them how to make a pre workout, add this much creatine, this much beta alanine. Could you just please come out with your own? And, finally, uh, through bodybuilding.com being my distributor when I launched 2013, I finally decided, okay, let's do something where instead of me telling them, don't buy a pre workout that has this or doesn't have this, here's literally a educational tool on what a pre workout should look like. And so, really, the supplements that I make are sort of twofold. They're for myself because I couldn't, really trust what every other
Mm,
manufacturer was putting into their supplements. So I wanted to make sure that what I was getting was exactly what I wanted in my supplements. So that was really the first reason. But the second reason is it's a perfect educational tool when I
mm.
say, here's what a pre-workout, should look like. So, but anyway, here we
So
are
cool.
in 2025 now, 12 years down the
Yeah.
road since launching that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's why I mean, it's actually my husband again said something along the lines of what's the saying? People who can't play teach, right? Like in
right.
sports. And he was like,
Yes.
Jim is like an exception to this because he's gotten, himself into like elite shape and helped others do that. But like, so, having the personal experience and then also the teaching experience.
Yeah,
It's
you have
something
to.
that really
Right.
appreciate
Personal
about you.
experience is important. And, it's one of the things that I say about scientists is that it's great to be a scientist and be well informed in the science of what's happening in the lab. But until you understand how to apply it in the real world, it,
Mhm.
it's it matters. It really matters. And so until you're actually trying to do it on your own body, it's really hard to have an appreciation, for what goes into, gaining a half inch on your biceps or losing, 5 pounds of body fat,
Yep.
until you've actually done it. It's great to have the science and the theory, but until you've done it yourself, it's hard to really help people.
Oh, mic drop. So true. Like this, it's the science and the application and bringing those together of that.
Yeah,
And
and really that's,
yeah.
I was a hardcore, scientist. I was at Yale School of Medicine, Department of Cellular and Molecular Physiology, literally working in the lab, pipetting, doing PCR, looking at what genes get turned on and off. And I literally left that to go work for a bunch of muscle magazines. So all my colleagues were just like, they wanted to have an intervention with me. They're like, you have a massive career here at Yale, like as a leading research scientist, and you're going to throw that away to work for a bunch of muscle magazines. And and I said, this is my calling. It's you know there's few people that can take what's going on in the lab and water it down, or make it available to the layperson and teach them
Mhm.
why what happened in the lab might be important for your next workout, for your next meal, etc. And so, I laugh about it now because, looking back, I'm so glad I took that jump. Um, and
What made you, what was that thing that made you like, was it just because you really like, I actually already know I have this passion for this side of it, or like,
well, I
what
have
made
I
that?
have my undergrad minor is in English, right? So I have a passion for reading and writing. I've always
Mm,
enjoyed that. Even as a kid, I used to write a lot. So I love writing. But when I was at Yale, one of my main areas was the uncoupling proteins, which basically poke holes in mitochondria and make them less efficient so that you burn more calories. And one of the things that we were looking at is fasting, intermittent fasting. And so to get more, grant money, I've got to put in through the NIH these grant proposals on uncoupling proteins and gene transcription, yada, yada. Well, when I'm on PubMed, this is, 2000, going back 1999, 2000, and I'm seeing these studies pop up about creatine and, you know, and this and that. And I'm like, I don't even have time to read that, and like there's so much research that's going by that I've got to focus on this one small area that I'm working on, these uncoupling proteins. There's so much out there that I'm missing that I want to be, reading and absorbing and teaching people about. And so I started writing for the magazines, taking the research that I was doing and writing articles for them. And then they offered me the science editor position. And it was right around that time I was just like, this this is my calling, I think.
that's
And
so
so I took
awesome.
that jump. I left academia, much to the shock of my all my colleagues were,
They're like, what are you doing? What are you
yeah,
doing with your
they
life?
thought I had it, they were like, why are you throwing your career away? I'm like,
I think it worked
I
out.
yes.
Yes. Oh, and that's yeah, like I remember I was sharing with you before we started recording, and for our listeners now, like Justin, my husband, and I met in the gym back in 2015, and it was actually a gym relationship that actually worked out. Here we are today. But he was, before I was really even, I don't think I was really even taking any supplements at that time. And also like I was already training, but I don't know. He did help me in a lot of ways, really like hone in on some things, and sharing a lot of your articles from like bodybuilding.com and just a lot of the free content that you put out there. So you have a really awesome way of taking complicated, things and, giving them to the layman, where
Yeah,
someone can actually absorb
it's
it.
important that,
Yeah.
and I try to write to, myself as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
A lot of scientists try to impress their colleagues,
Yes.
you know what I mean, with, using scientific terminology. Well, the average person who's reading your article in a muscle magazine, doesn't know what PPAR is doesn't know.
You've
It's
lost them. You've lost them.
exactly. You've already lost them. He's talking about PPAR.
Yeah.
I know you think that you need to write something on the level that your colleagues will appreciate, but you need to write something that, a 16-year-old kid can understand and
Yep.
then take to the gym and apply it, or take to the kitchen and apply it.
Yes. Oh, so good. So good. And that's actually kind of alongside of our topics today. Some things I wanted to pick your brain on was originally I was thinking maybe if you could talk to the point of like some of the new trends and goals and things like that people have in the fitness space, but would actually like if you could highlight the tried and true methods because there is so much mess out there and just so much, shiny object syndrome. So like if like our conversation today could be around like the tried and true methods that have remained the same and still really just work, the stuff that truly works. And also like some of your advice for breaking like fat loss and muscle building plateaus. I know those are some things my audience will definitely appreciate. And things a lot of people experience too. And right now, we're living in an industry in a time where people are constantly chasing trends. I'm sure you see that in your
Oh yeah.
communities some too. So like what principles of training and nutrition like do you believe like have really truly stood the test of time and like would you have people focus on?
Yeah, I think that number one is consistency. You know what I mean? Everybody wants this like quick, how am I going to get there the fastest? And it's like, let's just be consistent.
Mm.
Like,
The C word no one likes.
yeah, like I think that's the number one issue. People like you or me, where this is our career, well,
Mhm.
consistency doesn't seem to be an issue for us, right? Which is why
Right.
we're successful in our fitness goals and in our fitness careers as well. But I think the majority of people who, when I see people who I haven't seen in like 20 years or something, like, oh my God, you're 57. How do you stay in such great shape? And I'm like, look, and he's probably a lawyer or something, right? You know, typical, pot belly, has lost a bunch of muscle mass and he's looking at me at 6% body fat with 18-inch biceps. And it's like, well, what drives me is a little different than this is my career,
Right.
you know, I have to look a certain way or people won't believe what I'm saying, you know,
Credibility.
right. If I'm going to teach you how to lose body fat, I better show you that I know how to get my own body fat. If I'm going to teach you how to build your biceps, I better show that I know how to build my own biceps. And so, it's a little different for us because we have a different goals and what drives us every day. But for the average person who fitness is not part of their career, you've got all these other hours of work and family and, responsibilities. The consistency of your training tends to, it's low on the totem pole. Whereas for you and myself, our training is important to me as brushing my teeth in the morning and before
Yep.
bed. You know what I mean? I'm not, you
We're gonna make it
know,
happen.
not
Yeah.
going to miss it. But again, it's a different priority for us. So I think the number one thing that I try to teach people is let's be consistent, whether it's with their nutrition, whether it's with their workouts, whether it's with just trying to increase. When I say workouts, what you do in the gym is different from what you do during the day. And what I mean by that is you even if you worked out 2 hours a day, it's not enough for you to then go sit in an office or go home and watch TV for 4 hours. Even though
Yep.
you're working out, you still need to be active throughout the day.
Oof.
Meaning, don't take the elevator or escalator unless you need to, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're capable of walking stairs, please walk the stairs. You know, if you're capable of walking, don't circle the parking lot looking for the closest spot to target. pick the furthest spot and get a few extra steps walking in and walking out of the store. It'll also be quicker, than driving around the parking lot, searching for that closest, spot. And so I'm about looking for ways to increase your physical activity all day because I might be getting a little sidetracked here, but there's
Yeah.
there's research that shows that people who train the same. So again, this is, relying on their evaluation of their workouts, but who work out about 90 minutes per week on average, right? When they divide them into those who watch more than 40 minutes of television versus those who watch less than 40 minutes of television. And it's not about the television, it's about the sitting. Okay.
Hmm.
40 minutes or more of television means you're sitting a lot. Okay. So
Yep.
those who were sitting more, even though they were doing similar amount of working out each week, those who sat more had higher waist, larger waist circumference, higher resting blood pressure, and higher blood glucose levels. So, you know, even though they're working out the same as the other group, the ones that were sitting more had less favorable outcomes, right? And
Yep.
are sort of, we're looking, they're pre-diabetic, they're almost pre-obese and uh, pre-hypertension, um, despite working out. And the only difference was how much time they were sitting. So I'm adamant about being consistent with your physical activity throughout the day
So
and doing
good. I hear that a lot from people too, where they're
that.
like, but I work out 5 days a week. And I'm like, yeah, but what's your 1 hour workout versus what are the other 23 hours?
Right. And so speaking of genes, which is one of the areas that I've done a lot of research on, when you're sitting for more than 30 minutes, your body thinks you're basically sleeping. The human body has not evolved yet far enough where we're still not concerned about predators, right? About finding food, right?
Hmm.
And so sitting, the only time that the human body, based on evolution so far, right, eventually will probably evolve to the point where it's not a problem. But we're we're designed to move
Yep.
when it's daylight. Okay, we're designed to move all day long. Like I said, looking for food or trying to prevent ourselves from being food. Um, right, and there's just work involved in surviving. So when we sit, we start shutting down genes that control things like glucose utilization, fat oxidation. Those things start getting shut off. Okay. And so that's not only bad for body composition, that's bad for your metabolic health. And so one of the things that I've developed is my 30-60 rule. So for every 30 minutes, if you're at the office and you're at your desk, every 30 minutes, get up and do 60 seconds of activity. Anything. Could be
Love
stretching, it
that.
could be walking to the water cooler, walking to the bathroom, walking the steps, doing some push-ups, some body weight squats, jumping jacks, whatever you want, but at least 60 seconds of some movement to help keep those genes turned on and activated.
So good. I love how attainable that is because I think a lot of people listening would be like, but Jim, I can't like move all day long. I have to work. And it's like that, but that's very attainable for
Yeah, for every
anyone.
30 minutes that you're sitting,
Yep.
just
Six,
simply stand
60
up,
seconds.
and do some type, it could just be stretching, just do some type of movement, but get up and move. And I say sitting is the new smoking.
Yes. Yes, it is. All right. So movement outside of your workouts and consistency with your movement and
Yes.
nutrition would
Right.
be,
Yeah, your
uh,
workout, unfortunately, no one wants to hear this. Your workout isn't enough. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
come on, Jim, I work out and I still
Yeah.
have to be active. Like, yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Ideally,
Yeah.
And like I said, with the 30-60 rule, it's not like you're being active all day. Like every 30 minutes, you just have to move for 60 seconds.
Yes. Yep. Literally bathroom breaks, water cooler breaks,
Yes. Yep.
air squats, whatever.
And it's not only important for metabolic health, but they've also found that you get, when you sit, you have reduced blood flow to the brain. So
Mm.
it even helps with cognition and memory and performance.
So good. So good. It's so underrated. People would be like, "Ah, no, it can't be that important." But I'm
Yeah,
like,
and you know
"No,
what
it
else? Back in the day when I was a competitive bodybuilder, and this goes back to like when I was 19, 20 years old. I'd go do on Sunday was leg day. You'd go to Sunday, get leg day, and then we'd order all this food and I'd sit and watch football and I wouldn't move and I just eat because I thought that was the best way to recover. And now there's research showing that those who move less after a leg workout don't recover as well as those who do more activity. So you actually do want to move.
you doing it."
It helps with blood flow, right? And with blood flow, it's not just about getting nutrients and oxygen to the muscle, but it's about getting waste products away. The more blood flow you have going to the muscle, the more blood flow you have going away from the muscle, and that's carrying away those waste products, which helps speed up your recovery process.
So
So
good.
movement. I can't say it enough.
Movement for fat loss, body recomp, recovery. Move, just
Health,
move.
yes.
Movement. Move. Well, and when you think like even back on your own training, like what have been some practices for you that have just like never let you down? Like no matter the phase of life you're in or your goal, like, what are things that you're like, these are my foundational kind of like we talked about, like you're like, we're gonna make a workout happen, Like what are some other foundational things that you're like, these are the tried and true things that have never changed and like never let me down.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to say because I'm a scientist and
You
I'm
try.
about those little nuances and changing. And, like when I started in muscle and fitness, this was in 2002. I actually started writing for them around 1999. But when I was there in the building at Muscle and Fitness, um, we would tell people only have whey protein around workouts, not casein. Okay, so with milk protein, for those of you who aren't aware, milk protein is two types of protein. There's whey and there's casein. If you open up a yogurt, you take the lid off of a yogurt, right? That liquid, clear liquid stuff that's sometimes sitting on top, that's basically your whey. And the white stuff, that clumpy, globby white stuff, that's your casein. And you can already kind of see the difference between them, right? The whey is soluble, it's liquid, right? That's your fast protein. The casein is very slow digesting because it's like an onion. It has layers like an onion. And so when the enzymes break down casein, it has to break it down layer by layer by layer. Whereas with whey protein, it can break it all down at once. And so it's once the digestive enzymes break it down, basically all those amino acids are now free form amino acids. Obviously, there's dipeptides and try, but it's broken down, right? Almost once those enzymes hit it. With casein, the enzymes hit it, but they only hit the outer layer. And then you have to get them. And so a casein protein can last like 7 hours, whereas a whey protein will only last about 2 hours, meaning it shows up, the amino acids show up in your blood. And then by 2 hours later, they're pretty much gone out of the, they've been digested and absorbed, whereas casein will last for like 7 hours. So we used to say casein is too slow. Don't drink that around your workouts because it takes so long. But now we know that whey, yes, it's fast, which is important for if you want to get those amino acids to your muscles for recovery quicker. But it's probably better to also have some casein because the casein extends so when you build muscle, right, there's a spike in what we call muscle protein synthesis. And whey is great because it immediately spikes it. But then if you're just drinking whey, that spike immediately drops. If you have casein there, that's with the whey spikes the muscle protein synthesis, but the casein keeps it going for longer. Okay. And there's some
Yep.
data, some evidence and research studies that show if you add casein to a whey shake, the after 6 weeks or whatever the study time, those with the casein build more muscle than those who are drinking just the whey. So, these things change. We all the time. We
Yeah.
we used to recommend, remember, the fat burning zone for cardio. Don't
Yep.
go too intense.
Yep.
because you only burn carbs. But if you go at 70% of your max heart rate, nice, slow, and steady, you burn a higher percentage of fat. Yet now we know the percentage of fat doesn't matter because you're probably burning fewer total calories.
Yep.
Plus, does it really matter what you're burning during your workout? Probably not. And you know why? Because, and this is a very simplified explanation, but if you're burning fat during your workout, during your cardio workout, right, as your primary fuel source,
Hmm.
what are you going to burn to recover from that workout? Well, your body knows that you're preferentially using fat during your workout, right?
Hmm.
So during recovery now, you're going to burn more carbs to preserve more fat for the next workout. However, if you went in and instead of did 70% of your max heart rate and did high intensity interval training, where you're pretty much not burning any fat, you're pretty much just burning carbs because it's, it, you know, intense exercise requires quick energy, and relying on fat is a much slower process to derive that energy than breaking down glucose, right? And so during a high intensity interval workout, you barely burn any fat, right? But what do you burn after that workout is over to recover? Fat,
That. Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
and, and so what the body evens out what what you're burning during your workout. You're likely going to burn less the rest of the day. Okay. So if you think about it from that, and what's frustrating is like that 70% concept of fat burning was debunked decades ago, but now there's so many fitness influencers and so many fitness influencing um, not websites, but like handles, on like
Hmm. Yeah.
stock, that they have to come up with content, and they're regurgitating this, lower intensity burns a higher percentage of fat. Again,
Yeah.
it's like returns. You know what I mean? Like this bad concept of you should train, slow and low to burn more fat. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
no,
It's like
no.
how much do we have to debunk some
And
of
and
these
so
things?
yeah, and so there's so many things that we thought were tried and true. So it's almost like, almost nothing that I used to do. I wouldn't say almost nothing, but this, as a scientist, I'm about those nuances, right?
Yep.
And again, does it matter to the average person? No. Um, but what is tried and true? Periodization, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I can
Periodizing.
appreciate too, like, to rewind for a second, like I can appreciate that you, like, as a scientist, it makes sense because you're like, with new things and new research, I'm going to try new approaches in those nuances. But also someone who can change your mind on stuff like, oh yeah, we used to not do it this way because that's all we knew. And now there's new research. So we're going
Yes.
to do it better
Right.
now. Yeah. So that's, I mean, that
Yeah.
makes
But
so
we're
much
still
sense.
not the problem is we still don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, you like the more you learn, the more you learn that the more you know, the more the less like
Yeah, you learn how much you don't know.
right,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
like with muscle growth, right? We know things like muscle protein synthesis and mTOR and you know uh all these things, but there's also things like microRNAs that then break down all the protein that you just synthesized. Why would the body spend time and effort and calories to build up a protein and then microseconds later just devour it all? Why? Why would the body do that? We don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
These are the things we don't know, you know? And so one of the things I like about the saturation of fitness influencers is you'll see more research being discussed. Okay.
Hmm.
So now there's, before it was just me and a couple other guys on YouTube talking about, oh, this study showed, if you did the bench press, blah, blah, right? Now there's
Yeah.
more being presented to us, but they're presenting it as if it's the answer. It's like, this is how you should now train. You know what I mean? Like there's a study that showed um, high reps, like 20 to 30, took longer to recover from between sets and between workouts than heavyweight and low reps, like 6 to 8. So there's a camp of fitness influencers going, so 6 to 8 is better because you recover faster, see, and you can get in more workouts. And my mind is going, what happened with the high reps that didn't happen with the low reps that caused recovery to take so much longer? What did
Hmm.
those high reps instigate that the low reps didn't? So
Yeah.
instead of saying one is better than the other, I'm saying they're clearly both important for different reasons, right? And so
Mm,
you would want to use both, in my opinion. Yet
mm,
there's an entire camp of thousands of fitness influencers going 6 to 8 reps. That's all I do. 6 to 8 reps. You recover faster, and it's just like, it's,
yeah.
I hate to tell you
Mm,
this. It's not that simple.
yeah. Yes. Well, that's what I always say. I'm like, there's 500 ways to skin a cat, where I'm like, there's like so many ways to approach it that could get a similar end result,
Yeah. And what also bothers me about that concept of just to see, or the bodybuilders that go, there's pro bodybuilders that will tell you all I do is 10 to 12 reps. I've been doing that for 10 years. I never change, right? Okay, that's fine. They're using something that us natural athletes aren't using to help their muscles respond. So they probably don't need to periodize their training. But my other thought is, doesn't that get boring as heck? Like, don't you want like a new challenge? Like
Yes.
try going to 20 to 30 reps. Yes, you're going to use considerably lighter weight and look weaker in the gym to all your buddies, but just try that. Tell me that it's a new challenge. And so,
Hmm.
that's one of the things what I like about periodization is it keeps the boredom. It's like, oh,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Now I'm training 3 to 5 reps going super heavy. And then next week I'm going to 15 to 20. Now, it's a whole new challenge. It's something to look forward to. And I think that's important for longevity as far as, you know, not stagnating and not getting bored, let
Yes. Oh,
alone the
yes.
different physiology that's going on, with the high reps versus the low reps.
Well, and talking about back to consistency too, a lot of people, it's the boredom factor or what, where they tend to fall
Yes.
off. So
If
even
you
for
told
that,
90% of the people that all you're ever going to do for the next 10 years is go to the gym and do 10 to 12 reps, 3 sets of 10 to 12
go for
reps,
it.
it, after a
I'd
month,
fall off
they're going
too.
to be, they're, they're going to be, most people are going to be bored.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so that was one thing you mentioned for some foundational things like
Yeah,
periodization
periodization,
being
progressive
one,
overload, right?
progressive overload.
Those are things that, we know work. Um,
We know work, and there's still even with those so many ways to do it, but
yeah. And
they're
I think the other thing that works is volume as far as your training experience. The more what I think a beginner should do is try to train with as little volume as possible. And as you progress, you increase the volume, as you have more years under your training belt. Otherwise, if you go in as a beginner and start with 20 sets per muscle group, you're going to be super sore, maybe get rhabdomyolysis, right? From severe muscle breakdown. But if you're starting at 20, where are you going to progress to?
right.
You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
that's the thing is like at my age, at 57, and my training age, which is literally I've been maybe not hardcore since I was 7, but my dad brought me down to the basement gym to start working out when I was 7.
That's awesome.
I have photos of me at 11 posing, doing all the standard poses in the backyard. So I've
Yes.
literally been been at it for almost 50 years. To make any more progress right now as a natural athlete for me, I would probably need to do somewhere close to like 30 sets per week to get, you
Yep.
know what I mean?
Hmm.
To see a hypertrophy response beyond just maintaining. Um,
Yeah.
what, what I need. So, the thing that I try to warn these beginners is do as little as you need. You know what I mean? Like that
Yes,
key is to do as little as you need. And then as you build up the experience, you start adding more and more volume so that you can keep a hypertrophy response.
totally. The minimum effective dose when you're
Yeah.
starting out
And again, I'm
of.
talking about hypertrophy here. Strength is a whole different animal. You don't want too much volume with strength. It's more neurological than muscle based. Obviously, a stronger muscle tends to be a bigger muscle, but most most of the progress that's made in strength and trained individuals is neurological.
Yep. Well, and I think it's awesome that you were posing as young as 11 and starting out at 7 years old. I have a son now, a newborn, and I'm like, between me and my husband, I'm like, he better be up in the gym with us, you know. He already has little dumbbells, little
Yes, I
shaky
know the
dumbbell.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But also my husband shared with me too that your dad is in really great shape too, right? He was talking about grip strength and how you also taught him about grip
Yeah.
strength, how important that
Yes.
is.
He has, we have this weird Stoppani grip. It's genetic. Okay. I mean, obviously my father works out. That's why I started, working out when I was a kid. But when I was in high school, I worked for an auto mechanic shop. I worked in the shop helping, the guys fix the cars. Um, and whenever they couldn't get an oil filter off with the wrench, you know what an oil filter wrench looks like? It wraps around the oil filter.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, you can't really get in there and get the wrench in there because the other parts are in the way. So if they couldn't get, or they just couldn't get it off, for some reason, when they get hot, they expand and then it really seals and you can't unscrew it. And so they have a wrench that you take it off, but sometimes with a wrench, it's so tight on there, it's basically fused on. So if they couldn't get one off, they would just call me over and I would literally take them off with my bare hands. And literally everybody would be like, "What? Like, I mean, I was pretty big in high school because I was lifting, um, but there's something about Stepani grip strength. So my dad now does these, and the way he started. A lot of people think my dad got me into the fitness industry. He just got me into working out. I got my dad into the fitness industry because when I was at Muscle and Fitness, I would go to the Mr. Olympia, the Arnold Classic every year, right? And they have the big expo
Yep.
where all brands, supplement brands, fitness equipment brands have their booths. And Concrete, who makes creatine hydrochloride, um, they had a booth where they had these, you know, like weighted balls that you had to pick up only using, your hands, and almost no one could. The heaviest one they had, basically no one could pick it up. Even like the strongman competitors would come by, and my dad walks over and he just picks it up and he's holding it and he goes, "What are you supposed to do with this?" And the concrete guys are like, "How did you lift that?" And then they're like, "Wait a minute, you look familiar. What's your name?" And he goes, "Jim Stoppani." And they're like, "Jim Stoppani? You're not Jim Stoppani." Well, no, I'm his dad. And they're like, and so
That's
they
awesome.
they hired my father. Concrete hired my father to work at their booth to do all the grip strength challenges because and you know at the Arnold and at the Olympia they would also have strongman competitions. So all these professionals, I'm talking like 6'9", 500-pound guys, giants would come over and they couldn't beat my father and would be so frustrated. So yeah, so
So some genetics,
it
some
is. Yeah. Some genetics. It's a lot of genetics for some reason.
That's
But maybe it's
wild.
epigenetics because his father was a bricklayer. So maybe it's you know,
Those functional
yeah,
yep, jobs and stuff.
epigenetic. So,
Yes,
but
epigenetics.
anyway.
Yeah. Okay,
So
well, I
yeah,
have
my
a
father's
random
currently
question.
81 years old. But
Your dad is 80 is 81?
81, but you would
Oh,
never know when you look at him.
I love that so much. That's goals. So
Same with
good.
my mom too. I mean, my dad's always been the weightlifter, but my mom She played sports as a teenager. And actually, I'm left-handed and she is. So she taught me a lot of like tennis and golf because of the left hand. But she's at 81, you would never know,
That's so
she's
awesome.
81.
Movement is medicine, man.
Exactly. They
That's
move.
it.
They've
That's
always
it.
moved. Yep.
Okay, well, along the genetics conversation really quick before we move on, personal advice for me, I carry definitely more of my weight in my lower half and I really want more defined quads. And I
Yep.
work out very consistently. Nutrition's pretty consistent, protein, all those things. Volume wise, what would be, do you have some recommendations for me? Just even for actually, and I've started working out at home. So I have barbells and dumbbells
Yep.
and a cable machine at home with my kid. I've been working out at home now. So not all the machines, but I've also just ordered actually like a leg extension for the house too.
Mhm.
So anyway, any just, without knowing a
So
ton
you're
about me,
so you would
advice.
like to spot reduce your legs, is what I'm hearing.
Not spot
Basically.
reduce, more so
Uh,
actually build more muscle.
Oh, you want to build more muscle. You don't
Yeah,
want
I
to
really want
off
just my
body
quads
fat.
to pop more. Yeah. Yeah.
So volume wise or frequency, it's going to be a bit of both.
Yeah.
You
Whatever.
know, like what is your what is your resistance training split right now? Like what are you full body? Do you do like a split? What is your
So I actually train kind of uniquely where I do something upper and something lower each time I train. So
Yep.
I'm training 5 or 6 days a week. I do, but I switch up the muscle groups. So like for instance, I might hit, I might do some kind of squat or lunge variation 2 or 3 times a week, and then a hamstring, deadlifts variation twice a week, right?
Yep.
And then also doing the same thing with upper body. So like giving the opposing muscle groups a break, but then so
Yeah.
it's
So
not
do you
full
have like a
body, but upper
push
and lower.
upper body and then a pull upper body or some?
And then I'll switch that up too. So talking about some variability, like
Yep.
sometimes I might do combine lower body, like hamstring day with shoulders that day.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
another week it might be hamstrings with like a push movement or a pull movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love I love variety and everything. Just
Yeah.
I love variety and the exercise choice. I mean, unless you're like a power lifter who wants to, you're competing in the bench press, then yeah, you got a bench
You
press.
got to bench
I mean,
press.
sure, we'll do a lot of assistance exercises, but our main focus is going to be around the bench press. However,
Yeah.
if you're just going for, fitness or hypertrophy, then I'm all about mixing up exercises. I'm all about mixing up rest periods. I'm all about mixing up which muscle groups I'm training together. And again, it gets back to, even if it's not about better results, it's about not being bored. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
repetition just gets to me. So I like,
Well, and at the end of the week, I'm still hitting those muscles the same I would be if I was doing a more traditional like split. It's still the volume is
yes,
there.
and
Yeah.
that's what you want to
Yeah.
focus on. You want to, I think one of the things that we've learned more recently is that weekly volume is more important than workout volume, right? Meaning if you take one workout and you look at how much volume you're doing, right? Well, I think that matters less than how much volume you're doing in the week. So, meaning, if let's just take chest as an example, right? If you go in and do 20 sets of chest on Monday, okay, and then you train once a week, right? 20 sets, 20 on Monday, every Monday, do 20 sets, okay? Or do you do 10 sets on Monday, 10 sets on Tuesday, on Wednesday, 10 sets on Friday? That would be 30 sets, right?
Yep.
And so with frequency, what I like about frequency, will it, the question is it better to train a muscle group twice a week, once a week, 3 times a week? I don't think that matters as much as the volume of the week. You see what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you can go in and you're a competitive bodybuilder who's been training for 10, 15 years, right? And you're like I said, the more training experience under your belt, the more volume you're going to need to get those hypertrophy responses. So if you can go in and do 20 sets in one day, that's great. And you can train once a week. However, if you find that, after the third exercise, you're just wiped and all those other final sets are kind of half ass, if you will, then you might be better off training twice a week and doing 10 sets and 10 sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yep.
still your 20, or even like 12 and 12, and now you've got 24. You get a little more, right? And it breaks it up. So I think the total weekly volume is more important than what you're doing per workout, right?
Yep.
So, so for you, if you're trying to do, and you do legs, what, 2 to 3 times per week, depending on,
Yeah. At least 3 times a week.
and what
Yeah.
are you doing for volume? Like total, what would you say your total sets?
So it's funny because, like we talked about, I switch up the rep range, and I switch
Yeah,
up
that's great.
the
That
sets. So I
I
mean, I'm normally doing
I
about four.
recommend.
Yeah, I normally am doing about 4 to 5 sets in the workout, and then I will often start with a compound lift, and then maybe add in two accessory exercises. So that could be a back squat, and then doing, if I'm trying to focus on glutes, so maybe I'm doing a cable kickback and one other glute focused exercise. But like my squat is my compound movement. And I think that's one thing with my quads, like getting more quad definition. I'm fortunate in a way where I'm like my quad and glute strength and definition's about even, but I'm like, I really want my quads to start popping more. And I feel like,
Mhm.
a lot of those exercises that are compound lifts or, using both, my glutes are a little bit more dominant than quad. So
Sure.
so yeah, but to answer your question, um, doing, you know, probably doing squats 3 times a week, or like lunge movements, quad
Yes.
dominant
Right. Yeah.
movements. Yeah.
Multi-joint.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you do any leg extensions in there?
So that is, actually have never really been doing, I've never really done a lot, even when I was going to the gym, because it's just out of time, like not wanting to wait for the
Oh
machine to
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
open. I would do them randomly, but I actually just ordered some equipment
Oh
from
yeah, you
Amazon.
actually said you just ordered a
Yeah.
leg extension.
Yeah. So I
So
have one coming.
the reason I
So,
asked is because there's a recent study that showed that squats were a poor exercise for the rectus femoris. So your forequad, you've got the vastus lateralis, right?
yeah.
You've got the vastus intermedius, you've got the vastus medialis, and then you've got the rectus femoris. And the rectus femoris is the one that crosses the hip joint, right? So when you go down into a squat, what happens to a bi-articulating muscle, right? A muscle that crosses two joints, which is the rectus femoris. It crosses the knee and it crosses the hip. Well, when you go down into a squat, you're stretching the rectus femoris from the distal end, right, at the knee, but you're creating slack at the hip because you're flexing. So what they found with studies where they measured the cross sectional area of those quad muscles is that the squat is poor at activating that rectus because of the slack that it creates.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears that the leg extension may be one of the only ways to really get more focus on that rectus femoris. And since you want, you know, to have that, I would make sure that you're including some um, leg extension.
Extension.
And on the leg
Okay.
extension, what I would recommend, I don't know if you've seen this study, where they had them do it, seated straight up, so 90-degree at the hips versus sitting back
Yes.
was like, not 108, not where they're always already, but, somewhere around, greater than 90, right? It'll allow that rectus femoris muscle to grow greater than when they were sitting upright because you're stretching that rectus femoris. Whereas when you're sitting upright, you're putting slack on it. And one of the things we know about muscle physiology is that when you stretch a muscle before you can contract it, right? Before it
Yep.
contracts with more force due to the elastic component of the muscle. And
Good.
probably why the leaning back leg extension is going to increase that rectus femoris more than an upright.
Okay. All right. So now I'm really pumped about my leg extension getting here.
And then the other thing I would recommend, as long as your knees are, if you have knee issues, I recommend the opposite of this. But if you don't, what I recommend is putting the lever arm, that where your ankles touch on the
Hmm.
pad, way back, so that not only are you stretching the at at the hips, right, that rectus femoris,
Yeah.
but you're stretching the quads at the knee, because what the evidence is kind of showing lately is that stretching that muscle is critical for hypertrophy. And possibly that first half of the range of motion might be the most important out of the entire range of motion. You know how we used to talk about peak contraction at the end? You want to get that peak contraction? That may not even matter. And in fact, there was a study on isometrics on the leg extension where they had subjects train one leg by doing regular leg extension, and the other leg was just an isometric, right? It didn't move. And it was the leg was on a stretch position, right? And all they did was push as hard as they could for the same amount of time as they did leg extensions. It was 30 seconds. Now, it was only, I think, 6 weeks in trained individuals. So there wasn't much of an increase. They had like the group doing the leg extensions increased um, that rectus femoris by 1% increase. The isometrics increased it by 2%.
Interesting.
Now, it
Okay.
wasn't statistically significant because the magnitude was, obviously 2% is double 1%, but 1% is only, it's like, you know, uh, if if you could double your money, but your money was 1 cent,
$1. Yeah.
you know what I mean? You would only
Yeah.
have you still, but if you could double $1 million, that,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So the magnitude of the increase wasn't enough for there to be a statistical significant difference between the two, right?
Yeah.
But even if you say that they both increased rectus femoris size equivalent, they didn't even move. All they did was the initiating the beginning of the leg extension, and it grew to the same extent as the leg that was doing full range of motion. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's also studies on half reps, right? Like with calf raises, doing just the beginning half grew the calves more than doing a full range of motion. And okay, and so and some studies are showing, in at least in trained individuals, doing a half rep will grow the muscle not more than a full rep, but equivalent to a full rep, equivalent, doing a half rep from the start to the halfway position and stopping, right? So if you're
Hmm.
doing bench press, it's basically bar from the chest, like Jay Cutler does, and only to the literally like this.
Yeah.
That's your half rep, equivalent to doing a full rep for muscle. So
For
again, am
hypertrophy.
I saying that you should do half reps? Maybe if you're a bodybuilder, that's your main, but it's pointing to where in the range of motion is the most critical part of the range of motion. Okay. And
Hmm.
and again, it's still early to you know throw everything into that one hat, but it's looking like that first part of the range of motion, particularly where the muscles under stretch and initiating the concentric, is the most critical signal to the muscle to grow.
Which makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Eh,
for the leg extensions, have again lean back so you're stretching the rectus femoris, and angle the if the lever arm is one of those adjustable ones where you can go way
mhm,
back, but it's
mhm.
way back so that your feet are like almost under your
Underneath the
butt.
knee. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But if you have knee issues, you don't you want to do the opposite and make the lever arm shorter so that you're not getting too much stretch, because that's going to irritate the knee.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I mean, like into that point of like, okay, maybe some half reps. Like it's that first part of the movement. But I imagine your advice would be like a combination of like full reps and maybe
Yeah,
some half reps.
there's a few ways that you can apply this, okay? And I tell people, play around with it if you want. You could do it like let's say you do 3 sets for an exercise. You could do one, the very first one, do one half, just half reps. Okay. And depending on the exercise, the benefit there is you're probably going to be able to use more weight
Hmm.
on those half than you can with a full rep, right?
Hmm.
And so you're placing more overload. Some exercises you probably will use less weight. Like if you're doing half reps on the bench press, it's actually harder
Yeah.
because this is your most people their sticking point on the bench press is at the beginning, right? It's much easier for most people at the top. So if you're a bodybuilder and you're doing full reps, right? You're by the time you get to the halfway point, you're now using shoulders and triceps to fit it in
Mm.
and not much pec. So the chest is essentially getting a rest at the top half, if you will, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you're reducing the time under tension on the pecs by, you know what I'm saying? By and you're actually giving it a little bit of a rest. So it may be harder. Like a lot of people go, oh, that's just cheating. And it's like, no, that actually may be harder because you're only going up halfway and then going right back down into the rep again. And so the pecs fatigue much quicker that way. But on some exercises, you'll find like on pull downs, if you're doing half reps, you can use significantly more weight
Hmm.
on pull downs, and that's going to place more overload. So you could do, like I said, do one half rep set at the start and then finish with two full. You could do an isometric if you want. And then on the very last set, what I would do for like pull down, say, is instead of just ending the set when you could no longer bring it to your chest, is you're still going, even if you're only bringing it to your head, and you stop when you can barely budge that weight.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
Because
Hmm.
all those little quarter reps, that you're still putting the muscle under stretch and then initiating the concentric part. As I said, this may be the most critical part of the pull down right here, just
Mm.
the top half, because the muscle is under stretch. And now you're maximizing the force that you can place to initiate that
Yep.
movement as long as you're using the muscle to initiate the movement, which is a problem a lot of people have, right?
Hmm.
Particularly with pull downs. A lot of people grab onto the bar and they initiate it with the forearms and the
Yep.
biceps. So if you're initiating at the, then it's not going to build your lats. You also have to know how to pull those shoulder blades back and down, focus on initiating with the lats. That's very important. But so like I said, you have two ways to apply this. You can either apply it at the start, do your first set as half reps or even isometrics, or you could apply it at the end, your very last set, when you're getting fatigued. Instead of ending that set, when you can no longer do a full range of motion exercise, keep going until you can barely move the weight and then end your set.
So good. See, this is what I'm talking about, people. Like, you have a great way of explaining, and I'm like, yes, it's just a different way to think about things like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yes.
and just like that mind muscle connection
And
too.
am
Of
I and
yeah.
then am I telling you that this is going to turn you into Miss Olympia? No. But like I
What?
said, based on the evidence that we have, it's starting to paint a picture of where in the range of motion is it most critical for instigating muscle hypertrophy.
Mm, hmm. So also, people, don't go judging others when you see them doing half reps. Maybe they're being
No,
intentional with their
right. Yes, they there's probably a method to their madness.
yeah, yeah. So good. So good. Jem, how are you doing on time? Do you have a little bit
No,
of time left?
I'm good. I've got a pretty flexible schedule. So
Okay, cool. Well, I would love, first of all, thank you for my quad advice. I'll report back, let you
yeah,
know
keep me
how it
updated.
goes. Um,
Oh,
but
we
I,
didn't really talk about volume though. So did you
oh,
say
yes,
you're doing
please.
4 to 5 sets total or 4 to 5 sets per exercise?
4 to 5 sets. No, so volume wise, like if I was doing, like say my main compound lift and then like two accessory movements, I would do all of those exercises for 4 to 5 rounds.
So yeah, so you've got 4 to 5 sets total. And so you're doing that
Yeah.
2 to 3 times per week.
Yeah. Hmm.
So you're up to probably max 15 sets per week,
Mm, yeah, conservatively 15.
right?
Yeah. But
Um,
probably closer to 20.
okay.
Yeah.
And how long you've been training consistently?
Man, consistently, actually, pretty much. I've been training since I was in college, but like I would say my strength training really, I was more of a cardio queen then. So I would
Yeah,
say
yeah.
strength
Yeah.
training wise, I got more consistent and really into it in 2014 or 2015. So about a
About 10
decade.
years.
Yeah.
10 years. So yeah, yeah, I think you need at least 20 sets per week
Hmm.
with
Okay.
with 10 years. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're going to do one 20 set workout
Mm.
once a week, you do 2 10, or you do 3 5, right?
Hmm.
And then play with it. See if you're not getting results, if you've been doing this for a while and you haven't been getting results, right? Obviously, you're going to add the leg extensions, which will help with the rectus femoris, right? But if you're still not getting results, then I would start thinking about adding a little more volume
Okay.
and
I like it.
see what you get from
Okay.
there.
All right. Will
And then
do.
the other thing that I wanted to ask is you were saying definition, which is why I said spot reduction. So when you say definition, do you mean that the muscles just aren't big enough to see the separation, or the muscles,
Yes.
the legs aren't lean enough to show the
More
separation?
so, muscles not large enough to see the separation.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah,
That's all.
it's more
You
like
know,
a slab.
and the
Like,
only reason
yeah.
I ask is because there's actual research on spot reduction. You
On
know,
on spot
yes, yes,
reduction.
that it's possible.
Okay, I have heard you're the one actually you talking about this recently for midsection
Yeah.
for stomach.
There's
Uh,
two studies that have been done that I'm aware of, at least on spot reduction. There's probably a couple others, but one was a very old one back when I was at Muscle and Fitness, and it was on legs. And what
Okay.
they had them do is basically an hour of leg extensions,
An hour.
an hour, an hour. Okay. And now this was not a like, this was an acute study where they just looked at where the fat was coming from, right? And they found that the majority of the fat that was being used was coming from the quads
Huh.
during the but again, this isn't like 3 sets of 10. This is a freaking hour,
I don't know if I could
literally
last
an
an hour of
hour.
leg
Okay.
extensions.
And now the latest study is on the abs. Okay. It's on the midsection. And they found guys that did an hour ab workout. So they had two groups. One group basically ran on the treadmill for 45 minutes, right? Or somewhere, whatever it was. Okay. The other group did cardio, like 30 minutes. But in addition to the cardio, they did an hour of abs where they basically did 4 minute sets of twists. So 4 minutes per side, 4 minutes, right? Per side. And then they did 4 minute sets, 4 sets of 4 minute sets of crunches. So 4 minutes per side of twists, right?
Oof.
4 sets of each side, and then 4 minute sets, 4 sets of 4 minutes of crunches, right? I'm not even sure I could crunch for 4 minutes straight,
I don't know if I could either.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I probably could, but it sounds pretty difficult. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, they had these guys do this, right? And over whatever it was, 6 or 8 weeks, the guys that were doing and the calories were equivalent between the two workouts. They burned the same number of calories. The group doing the hour ab work lost, they both groups lost the same total amount of body fat, but the group doing the ab work lost significantly more body fat from their midsection.
So interesting. So
So
if you can do that much
yeah,
volume
like
for
that's the
abs.
thing. It's not like going in and doing a couple sets of abs.
Yeah.
It's literally an hour.
An
So it's
hour
like
ab
it's
workout.
possible, but is it possible to do the workout? And they did that 4 times a week.
Oof.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine? Like,
No, I
yeah,
cannot.
you
Well, and
know,
for the quad example, is that how much time were they spending on or working, doing working sets versus resting in that hour? I'm like, I just
it
can't
was a
even
full hour
fathom
of work.
doing.
It was an hour of literally
Of leg extensions.
Yes, of leg extensions, like very light, obviously.
But
But
even
again, it's
still,
more like doing leg extensions as cardio. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like riding a
Yeah.
bike. You know?
All right, y'all. I'm gonna go do hours of leg extensions. I'll be
So,
back.
like, it's hard enough to get somebody to work out 4 times a week, let
Yeah.
alone do 4 1-hour ab workouts a week. However, there's going to be a physique athlete who's willing to
Yeah.
put in that time if it gives those results. So it's just
Yeah.
interesting to really think about that concept that, we used to think that when we were exercising, the fat was sort of liberated from all areas of the body evenly. But based now on 2 studies, an acute one and a chronic one, it looks like as long as you put in the time, the fat will come from that area that you're doing the movement in, which,
So
kind of flips that script on,
it
what
definitely flips the script.
now
But
again,
also, is it realistic
again,
for
like
people?
this is like it's not like just going in and doing a couple sets of abs. It's literally an hour of abs
Yeah.
nonstop.
Who's, yeah, the a very small percentage of the world who's gonna do that
Right. Or an hour
consistently.
of leg extension, an
Yeah.
hour, leg extension. But
Well,
anyway,
also,
you apparently can spot reduce.
yeah, I know. I'm like, well, you heard it here first, guys, because I'd be the first one to be like, you can't spot reduce, but I'm like, you can. It is
Yeah,
true. It's just,
you can, but you can't.
but you can't.
But you can, but you probably still can't.
Yeah. This is where fitness is such a gray area always. It's always it depends. Like
Right.
depends. It's so good. Well, one thing that I think would really help listeners too. So a lot of the people listening in my community, they are trying for body recomposition, not just like weight loss, but they want to build muscle. They want to look more fit, not just, get thinner.
Yeah, better
And
quality of life.
better quality of life, yes,
We want all the
balance, all the
benefits.
things. And so plateaus come up a lot, both for fat loss and for building muscle too. And first, a question I had for you, like even with plateaus, do you find, like in your experience with your community and just with all the people you've helped, do you find that plateaus are more often like physiological or psychological or like environmental factors like lifestyle, stress, etc.? Like, especially on the consistency conversation, like, do you find it's more like habits or, psychological stuff that's making us plateau or like more physiological
Yeah,
plateaus?
well, definitely psychology can impact, but you know, uh, the physiology of plateaus is real. And in
Hmm.
fact, that's kind of why I talked about volume for a beginner. You always want to do the least amount that you can to get the results.
Yeah.
So if it's muscle growth, right, and you're just starting out, you want to do the lowest amount of volume because eventually your muscles aren't going to respond to that volume. And now they're going to require a little bit more, right? And so, like I said, if you're doing 20 sets as a beginner, once your muscles adapt to 20 sets, you're going to do 30. Then how much time do you want to, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that way, right? And so the same for fat loss, right? This is what I don't like about keto diets. With keto diets, you take somebody who's eating 400 grams of carbs, and the very next day they're eating zero, basically, right? 10 or
Yeah.
20, 30 grams of carbs. And it's like, sure, they saw a rapid weight loss, but eventually their body is going to adapt to that carb intake. And now
Yeah.
what do you do? You've removed all their carbs. What are you going
Yes.
to remove
Yes.
now? Protein, right? Fat? Like it didn't have to be all or none. You could have taken that person at 400 grams of carbs and adjusted their diet to 300. And then that would have been sufficient enough for them to see weight loss, right? Then when they hit that plateau again, now we'll bring them down to maybe 200 or 250, right? And
Yep.
and gradually keep changing it up because like I said, the physiology of plateaus is real.
Mhm.
Your body wants to be in homeostasis. That's what a human body is designed to do, right? Maintain homeostasis. Okay. And that's why your metabolism slows down with a low calorie diet because you want to reach homeostasis. Okay. If you're on an 1800 calorie diet, your body is going to learn how to run all your processes on 1800 calories. It's going to figure out how it has to, you know what I mean? Or you'll die. So
Yes.
homeostasis is critical. So that's the physiology of plateaus is homeostasis. You know, the muscles, your body doesn't want big muscles. Trust me, they they're
They're expensive.
metabolically
Yep.
expensive. They're a lot to carry around, you know. And so
Yeah.
it's always trying, you know, that's why we have myostatin. It limits how much muscle growth, you can get because it's not that good to be huge. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
so, in fact, there's a new study showing that the bigger your muscles are, the lower your endurance simply because of the size of the muscle. And the nutrients have to get from the outside of the cell to the inside. So the bigger the cell is, the longer it's going to take. Even though we're talking about, molecular differences here, it takes longer to diffuse the oxygen and the nutrients from the capillaries on the outside of the muscle cell to the inside where the mitochondria are. Okay.
Mm.
So the muscles want to be smaller so you have better endurance, right? You can run away from predators for longer, right? That's homeostasis. It doesn't want to be too big. It wants to get you down to that normal size. You need body fat for energy, for fuel. You don't want to give up all. Your body does not want to look like this. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
that's not designed to function that way. It wants to have the storage because obviously it's easy for us to access food for most people in most countries, but our bodies haven't evolved past the point where we have to worry about starvation, you know?
Yep.
So your body wants to maintain that fat. So it's going to learn how to work at 1800 calories. It's going to learn to work at 800 calories if you go down. So that's why I like, my sort of rule of thumb is do the least you can to get the results. So the least cut of calories, the least amount of drop in carbs, right? Because eventually your body's going to adapt to that. And so
Yep.
now you have to, in change something, right? And so if you've dropped all your carbs, you know,
Now where do you go?
what do you right? Now where do you go? Sure, you can reduce protein and fat and you're going to get results, but you probably need that protein and fat, and you really probably didn't have to cut all your carbs out in one
Yes.
food,
That's so good. I think about that and share that with clients. Like as far as cardio, even like not overdoing the cardio. It's like
Yes.
when you're trying to create more of a deficit, then now let's up some cardio and like create
Yes.
a
It's
little
the same
more.
as the volume, right? Of
Yeah,
training.
but I've never thought about that
Don't,
in that
don't
sense
do too
for
much cardio, right? Because
yeah, for carbs too.
eventually,
Like
right? Eventually your body is going to adapt to the calories you're eating. So we've got two choices. We can reduce the calories or we can increase the calorie output.
yep.
If you're already running 3 hours a day, how are we going to increase your calorie output?
Yeah,
By
exactly.
making you go 4 hours? You know what I mean? So, like, let's
Yeah.
see what we can do with 20 minutes of cardio, then 30, then, you know what I mean? And then
Yes.
we can keep increasing the calorie burn versus the calorie reduction in what we're eating.
So good. And
So
I think
yeah, so the bottom line is sure there's physiology, there's psychology, there's environmental factors, there's who you hang out with, there's how your significant other treats your
mm,
fitness journey. Do they support it? Are they jealous of it? Those are things that are gonna, right?
yep.
But those are things I can't control for them. However, I can control their physiology, and that's something we know how to change, right?
Mm, so good. I like the point that you made too of like I share this with my clients sometimes of your body it doesn't care that you want to be a couple percent lower body fat for superficial reasons like and if you're already healthy and it's like it doesn't care that you want to put on a little more muscle mass like it's not here to help you do those things like to your point of homeostasis like
That's what your
like
body's here to do.
yeah it's
Maintain
not here.
homeostasis at all costs.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, and if someone has hit like a whether it's a fat loss or a muscle gaining plateau, like how do you recommend that they first identify why it's happening? Like whether it's
A weight gain
Nutrition or training
plateau?
related. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, typically it's, you know, if they're, as long as their training is for the most part, you know, as long as their training plan is decent, I think
Hmm.
nutrition plays more of a key than, oh, it's, you know, your chest workout isn't, an
You're doing a six
or
to eight reps instead of
yeah,
10 to
you know what I'm
12
saying? As
reps.
long,
Yeah.
you know, if you're talking about somebody who's been training for 10 years, right? And they're coming in and doing 16 sets of chest, right? And their chest isn't responding. Is it the chest workout? Maybe. But if they've been doing this for 10 years, right? And they know how to, use the pec muscles, they know how to do the exercises, probably it's more nutrition than training. And again, it all depends, right?
Yeah.
It may be both, but I'm probably going to first look at nutrition because people will put somebody who really wants to build a big chest typically will put the time in the gym,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
you've got an hour or whatever to focus on that thing. But the rest of the day, depending on, do they have a high stress job? Do they have kids? Are they, you know what I mean? That's when you're not on your game. You can spend an hour doing the perfect chest workout, but can you spend 23 hours doing the perfect nutrition day?
Yeah.
Less likely. You know what I'm saying?
So true.
And so I'll tend to look at their nutrition, right? And so
Hmm.
what I would say is obviously you've got protein, so it's about macros, it's about calories. And so what I like to do is I like to take a look at where they are. So I'll make them do like a 3-day dietary recall, with like my fitness pal, whatever. Take, 3 days and try to be as honest. Don't, a lot of people when they start recording what they're going to eat,
Yeah.
normally grabbing a bag of chips, but now they're like, oh, I got to write
Oh,
that.
shoot.
Well, I'm not going to have those chips. So be real with
Uh-huh.
how you eat so that you can get a snapshot of where you are at least in your calories. And then let's look at where you are because that's your starting point, right? Uh,
Yep.
uh, you know, you can't come along and go, oh, you're not growing muscle. Oh, well, you need to be eating 5,000 calories a day, right? Or you're not losing body fat. Well, you need to be on an 1,800 calorie. There's so many experts that do that to people. Like, well,
Hmm.
here's the trick: you need to be on an 1,800, and that's step one. 1,800 calorie diet. Well, where were they? What if they were eating 3,000 calories?
Right.
What if they were eating 800 already? They're probably eating too little right now, which is why they're not, right? And so
Right.
where they are matters. And so the first thing I like to do is get a snapshot of where they are. So, and you just do a 3-day dietary recall. And my real focus is on the calories. Okay. How many calories are you getting per day? Then I like to look at the macros. Well, are you eating close to a gram of protein per pound of body weight? How much carbs are you eating? Yes, protein's important, but for muscle growth, carbs are important too. You're a man. How much fat are you eating? Fat is critical for testosterone production. Low fat diets lower testosterone. So, where is your fat? Are you eating at least half your body weight in grams of fat? And so that's where I'll go. I'll look at the calories and then even without changing their calories, if their macros, if they're only eating half a gram of protein,
Hmm.
right? Then I'm going to up their protein, but maybe without even changing their calories. Okay? Maybe I'll lower their carbs a bit, keep them at the same calories, but now they're eating 50% more protein, 25% more fat. That might be enough. Okay?
Yeah.
If it's not, now we'll start playing with the calories. We know where you are calorie wise. Well, you got to eat more, and so and the same for fat loss. Okay. Back in the magazines, I had to give like a one size fits all diet for people,
So hard.
like, but it worked for the majority of people, right? You can do that. But for most people, you need to know where they are, where they're starting from, right? And
Yeah.
so now digitally, this is what I call my dieting 101. It teaches them how to record those 3 days. Where are you? How many calories are you eating? What do your macros look like? And then let's, even for like fat loss, let's take somebody who's eating 3,000 calories a day, right? Most people say, oh, you're eating too many calories. Mm, I don't know. Maybe are they? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, well, look at, sure, they're eating 3,000 calories, but 80% of it is carbs. They're
Yeah.
barely getting any protein. So let's not even change their calories. Let's just give them more protein, fewer carbs in their day. And I'll bet they'll start losing body fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then when they
Yeah.
hit a plateau, then maybe we'll start whittling away at the calories.
So
So
good.
anytime somebody hits a plateau, whether it's in muscle building, whether it's in fat loss, right? With muscle building, like you said, is it the training? Or
Mm-hmm.
is it the nutrition? I'm going to probably first look at the nutrition because, like, unless, like I said, unless you look at the workout, it's just like, well, yeah, of course. You know what I mean? But if they're coming in doing
Yeah.
3 sets of the bench press, 3 sets of incline bench, flies, cable crossovers, right? It's probably a pretty solid chest workout. You know what I mean? Like, is
Yeah.
it probably going to give them good results. What are they periodizing it? We can worry about that, but probably the nutrition is probably the first. And again, like you said, it all depends, but typically that's probably the first thing that I want to look at.
Which makes so much sense. And along the same principle of the minimum effective dose, I think so many people want to jump, the 1200 calorie diet.
Yeah.
It's like, why eat 1200 if you don't
No,
need
right.
to?
Like you're eating 3,000 calories. Let's leave you at 3,000 calories, but manipulate your macros and see what happens
Yeah.
for the
Yep.
next few weeks. Okay. And we'll know right away. It's easy to know if a diet's working or not. It's
Yeah.
easy to see in the mirror.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and which is the great thing about dieting, because if it's not working after 2 or 3 weeks, we can manipulate it.
You'll know. Yeah, that's so good. Well, and I have actually a question for you too on the opposite side, because I think a lot of people think or want to get your advice on bulking. So a lot of my communities, most of my community is women, and of course they don't want to get bulky, but they want to get fit and lean and shredded and whatever. But like, do know that they may need a little bit of a surplus or like a little bit more fuel to build the muscle, this and that. But I know my school of thought on it, but just curious how you approach it, especially if it's like for a woman. But like as far as a bulk. And like again, what is that minimum effective dose versus like the dirty bulk or, you know,
Right.
putting on a ton of extra weight that maybe you didn't have to. Anyway, your thoughts
Right.
on
Well, so
that side.
there's a study. So I usually lead with a study on my thoughts, but there's a study that showed that the higher percent your body fat was, the lower your muscle protein synthesis is to a meal. So you have a meal, right?
Hmm.
Somebody who's very lean has a much higher bump in their muscle protein synthesis than somebody who carries more body fat. So if we're trying to build muscle, we're trying to maximize muscle protein synthesis. So you probably don't. The, the reason everybody talks about like the dirty bulk is it's just easier,
Yeah.
right? Because you're in a surplus, right?
Yeah.
You're in a surplus of everything. You're in a surplus of protein. You're in a surplus of carbs. You're in a surplus of fat, right? So there's nothing limiting your your response as far as calories, as far as macros, right? There's nothing limiting the response that you should be getting. So it's the easiest way to gain
And it can
weight.
be hard to eat a lot of calories really cleanly too.
Right. And it's
But
very
yeah.
hard, right, to eat clean calories. But
Yeah.
if if muscle protein synthesis goes down linearly with your body fat, with a rise in body fat, then you probably want to be focusing more on a clean bulk, right?
Hmm.
Versus, like bodybuilders in the day used to get, pretty fat. And you see some bodybuilders in the off season and you literally couldn't tell that they even worked out.
Exactly. Well, that's what I think most women think of. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to bulk like that. And
Right.
they're like, and I'm like, we don't have to,
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, obviously it's easy to do, you know what I mean? As far as, hit that surplus, it's much harder to hit that surplus in a clean bulk. But I think, based on some of the data we have, that you're probably better off trying to, I mean, not maintain 5% body fat, but, you probably don't want to get up to 20% body fat for a male, um, who's, even though they're bulking, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Which
going
makes
to
so much sense
lower,
because
that's going to
the more
lower
fat
your
they
muscle
have, the
protein.
less muscle protein synthesis will
Right.
happen
Which is
with
what
from
you
meals.
want to maximize.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And do you have any like personal or client community stories of like, any strategies you've personally used, like, or coached someone through that have like for a plateau and even like for muscle building plateau or fat loss, but like how a breakthrough or like, I don't know, any kind of examples you could give of like
Um,
tweaks
well,
you've made or
on that 30-60 rule that I have, I've had people who, not necessarily clients, just people that follow my advice, but have come back to me and said things like, all I didn't change my diet. I don't even work out. All I did was your 30-60 rule and I lost 60 pounds, literally,
nice,
like just by increasing their physical activity throughout the day
nice.
and being cognizant of that. It's seriously, it's a life changer.
Such a life changer, man. That's like the
Yeah,
30,
but
60, 60.
but as
Yeah.
far as like specifics, it's really hard to say because everything is so individual, like what worked for one person is, due to this one issue that you know, they may have had that's, you know, not really applicable to you know what I mean? To every
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Yeah. It's so individualized when it comes down to that for sure. Um, well, I think I have like one more question for you along this thought. Actually, I have two more for you if you're here for it. But if you had to strip everything back to just like three non-negotiable practices for building strength and muscle, what would they be? If you're like three
um
things, go do this right now.
well, periodize, right? Uh
Mm-hmm.
which, you need progressive overload to periodize, right? That's your so I guess progressive overload is number one. Periodization is number two because that's how you get the progressive overload, right? How you
Mm-hmm.
change it up, right? And then I guess three, uh, you know, would be your nutrition, making sure you're eating enough calories, making sure you're eating enough protein. And, with protein, I typically recommend one, the research is like zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.9 grams per pound of body weight for muscle hypertrophy. And I would say strength too. You want to eat enough protein, but I just round it up to 1 gram. It's so much easier.
So much easier.
If you're 180 pounds, try to get around 180 grams of protein.
So good. So good. Okay. And last question. I have to ask you this. What would be if there's only three supplements that you could take or would recommend, what are those three going to be? Those three supplements.
Definitely creatine.
Yes.
Um, and I love, it's also kind of laughable that it's finally, it, it, it's finally, uh, doctors are finally recommending it, whereas
Yeah.
10 years ago, doctors
People
would
thought it was a
warn you,
steroid.
yeah, or they'd warn you of kidney damage and muscle cramps and muscle injuries and all this ridiculous stuff. And it's like, hey, doctor, you went to medical school. Do you know that creatine is an energy molecule? Like, that's all it is. It's an energy molecule. Sure, pull some water into muscles, but at the end of the day, it's a very critical energy molecule. You may have learned this in metabolism. Um, and so it's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, as long as you eat animal protein, you're getting creatine in your diet already. But now it's switched from doctors warning people about taking this muscle builder to, oh, it's going to prevent depression, it's going to increase your memory. Um, if you take a 25-gram acute dose after sleep deprivation, it'll reduce some of the negative, symptoms from sleep deprivation. Now everybody's all about creatine. And, you know, we've been saying this for decades, just waiting for everybody
But
to finally catch on. And the day is here. It
the day is here.
finally caught on. Uh,
I have to say, I was using it for muscle, purposes for a while, but as of recently, with the sleep deprivation of my newborn, I'm like, let's up
yeah,
that dose, baby.
very helpful.
Yeah.
But so definitely creatine.
Okay.
I'd say performance, if it's performance based, I'd say beta alanine, as
Mm.
it reduces fatigue. It basically buffers hydrogen ions. So, um, when you're exercising, right, your muscles, due to the hydrogen ions that get produced, the muscles get more acidic, and that acidity reduces the ability for the muscles to contract. Whereas beta alanine buffers those hydrogen ions so that the acidity is not building up and helps to reduce fatigue. Um,
So that could help with, your endurance and then also, which is
For
also
sure. And what I like,
byproduct.
and one of the things I say about people supplementing with creatine and beta alanine is it's like a 1-2 punch, because the
Mm.
creatine is your quick energy. When you're doing a bench press, right? That's how your muscles get energy, is the creatine, which gains a high energy phosphate, then donates that phosphate in the muscle to make ATP, which is the main energy currency of your cell, right? That's how your muscles basically contract. They need the ATP. And so what creatine does is it provides that quick energy, whereas the beta alanine is going to be effective later in the workout when you're starting to get fatigued, right? And those
Mhm.
later sets where you're doing a weight that the first set you could do 12 reps on. Now set number 3, you're only getting 6, right?
Yeah.
The beta alanine, you're going to get more reps on those later rounds, as they found, like in boxers. It didn't increase their punching power like in round number 1, but in like later rounds, they were
Mm.
able to maintain their punching power better with the beta alanine. And it's due to that reduction in the fatigue. And punching power is strength in power. So that's the same thing as what you need when you're lifting: strength and power. And so that's what I like
So
about
good.
those two supplements. Um,
So
it's
good.
like I said, they work well together, because the creatine is going to give you that energy that you're going to need early on in the workout when you're lifting heavy. And then the beta alanine is going to save you later on when you're starting to fatigue. And then I'd probably
Awesome.
say a third, I guess a protein powder. Not that, you get enough protein in a day with whole food? Definitely.
Hmm.
Definitely. But if you're trying to get a bit higher protein intake, like if you're trying to lose fat, then I would recommend even going up a bit higher. And the research supports this, with the protein even closer to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight, right? It will actually help with the fat loss and help you either maintain more muscle mass or even build more muscle while you're burning fat. Um,
So
and
good.
and then
Any specific type of protein powder?
So I prefer like a blend. So
Okay.
I think we talked about this early on.
Hmm.
The whey, like your whey is very fast, right? But if you drink just whey, it's like I said, the amino acids appear in your bloodstream and then they are gone. And so it's almost too quick. But if you get
Hmm.
the whey, right, and the casein, you get that quick spike in muscle protein synthesis, and then the casein maintains it for longer. So I like to have a blend of both fast and slow digesting protein.
Okay.
And and around workouts, I like getting protein around workouts. Is it critical? No, you've got a couple hours of a window
Hmm.
that you want to hit, right? So do you have to have protein immediately when your workout's done? No, but the way you build muscle is by creating these spikes in muscle protein synthesis. So if you work out, right, and then you don't eat for 4 to 5 hours after, right, and you
Mm.
still build muscle, yes, but think about the spikes in muscle protein synthesis that you missed, right? There's only
Yeah.
so many hours in a day. Okay. If you eat 5 hours after, you've only got one spike 5 hours later. If you eat immediately after, you get a spike. And then if you still ate that 5 hours later, you get a second spike in muscle protein synthesis. Okay.
Mm,
And is this important how many spikes you get? It may be, as there was a recent study where they broke men while they were doing a resistance training program into two different groups. They got about the same amount of protein per day. Okay. But one group, they split it evenly among the three meals: breakfast, lunch, and dinner, somewhere around 30, 33 grams of protein at each one of those meals. Okay.
mhm,
The other group got a breakfast of only 10 grams of protein, a lunch of 30 grams of protein, and a dinner of 60 grams of protein. So the same total amount of protein each day. The group that was getting the equivalent protein each time grew or gained 40% more muscle mass.
wow, that's significant.
And the theory is that that breakfast, the 10 grams, it wasn't enough protein to spike muscle protein synthesis because it takes about 3 grams of leucine. Leucine is
Mm,
basically a key that turns on muscle protein synthesis. It activates what's called the mTOR complex, right? And what the research is sort of showing, again, we don't know this, but this is what we're seeing right now, is about 3 grams of leucine to adequately turn on muscle protein synthesis.
mm,
Well, it takes at least 30 grams of protein to get 3 grams of leucine. So the 10-gram breakfast did not have enough leucine. So those guys only got two spikes
mm,
each day in muscle protein synthesis, whereas the guys getting the 30 plus grams got three spikes and they
mm.
gained 40% more muscle. So is it critical to eat immediately after you work out to get a protein shake in? No, right? But
Yeah,
if you want to maximize the number of spikes you're getting in muscle protein synthesis, it might be a smart idea.
so good, so
So
good.
creatine, beta alanine, and a protein blend of, a fast and a slow digesting protein.
So good. Oh, actually, and speaking of leucine, back to my husband when we were first dating and talking about you, and he was sharing articles, and I was getting into the more of the supplement space. He showed me, here Jim shows it's a 2-1-1 ratio. You want to look for that for leucine, isoleucine, and
Yes.
baleen. Yeah.
Yes.
So, so good. Thank you so much for just breaking all of this down, and also for your time today.
Oh, it's been a blast. Yeah.
It's been so much fun. I can't wait to go brag to Justin about our conversation. Um, thank you, thank you. Where can everyone find you? What is the best way to find you?
The typical social media platforms. If you just look for Jim Stoppani on, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter,
Yeah.
YouTube, and then I have jimstoppani.com, which is my workout website and app.
Okay, awesome. So good. And I will add all of that in the show notes as well. But basically, y'all just go search Jim Stoppani. You'll
Yeah,
find him.
you'll find it somewhere.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Yes.